one, because this one is teeny. And we could do something like that. If you don't enjoy it, I'm not doing it the whole video, I promise. But today we're going to talk about a solved murder case. Actually, I almost blew it out with all my hot air. It was solved 2 decades after it happened by a cop who stumbled across the case on Facebook and took it upon himself It's not a very big candle. But it does make cool sounds. Anyway, sorry if you didn't like that. Tell me in the comments below so I know whether I should get some bigger ones or just abandon that idea. It smells really good though. Anyway, we are going to talk about Amy Weidner today. And it is a case that I am actually surprised was not solved when it happened, but it did happen in 1989. So, as we all know, there wasn't a lot of DNA testing able to be done back then that we can do now, and a lot of these cold cases are getting solved. In fact, one of you guys, Miss Stephanie, decided that you would suggest some solved cases for me, which actually is really cool, and I will be looking into them. I don't remember the names, and I don't think that this was one that you recommended, but if it was, here it is. I always screenshot them on my phone so I can look back later. Couple things. Thank you guys so much for your well wishes as far as Sean's job goes. My job has bumped me to full-time, thank goodness, so I'm not as worried as I was last week when I was filming. He's having a bit of an identity crisis, which understandably, so he's not really sure which direction is up right now. He's actually in the living room sleeping, so I'm gonna film for you. And we're just gonna jump right in as usual. Again, thank you guys so much for everything. I cannot express what each and every one of you means to me. Thank you for your comments. Like I said, if you like the video, I don't know that you were there, and I do recognize your names. So, here we go. For more than 24 years, Gloria Weidner has been mourning her daughter, Amy, who, at the age of just 16, was murdered in their Indianapolis home. There is not one day of my life that goes by that I do not think about my daughter. She loved school, she loved education, and I always thought that someday she probably would have been a teacher. Her sister said that she was kind of the leader as far as doing the chores and making dinner. Cassie is the youngest of the 4 Weidner children, and she was just 12 when Amy was murdered. And despite the decades that have gone by, the Weidner siblings, Tanya, 1 year younger than Amy, and brother JP, 1 year older, have vivid recollections of their sister. They remember her baking a birthday cake and just being overall, a good sister, which I can't imagine losing a sibling. I would cut off my arm to save my sister. So Gloria was a single mom and raising the 4 children by herself. And of course, that came with any challenges, just like not being a single mother does. But a big challenge happened when she learned that Amy was 5.5 months pregnant. I was overwhelmed. I just couldn't believe it. I thought that was the worst thing in the world that could happen, but then I found out worse things she was just completely shocked when Amy came to her just crying and said, "Mommy, I don't want you to hate me." Gloria thought, well, I could never hate any of my children, but I really didn't know what to do. It did help that many of Amy's teachers were supportive. In fact, Jody George looks upon her memories of Amy very fondly, and she recalls asking Amy if she was pregnant, and Amy saying, "That's why I'm coming in every day early. I want to be sure that I'm caught up as possible so that if I have to miss school, I won't get behind." And Jody, being a kind teacher, said, "Well, let me know. I will do whatever I can to help you." A side note, which some of you like and some of you don't like, I'm never going to stop doing it though, so sorry. I think every kid needs a teacher like that. I had a teacher that saved my life. I don't know how I would have made it through without her. And I think you do have to be a special person to be a teacher, but I think that all teachers are not special people to the kids. It takes a lot to make an influence on someone's life, and I respect anybody that does that. Anyway, tangent over, sorry. Gloria made it clear that Amy would keep school as a priority, and she told Amy that she did not want her involved with the baby's father, at the time 17-year-old Tony Abercrombie. He was a friend of Amy's brother JP that she had been quietly seeing. I was angry. I'm not going to tell you any differently. I felt betrayed by a young man who I would say was my son's best friend, said Gloria. In October of 1987, Amy gave birth to a beautiful daughter named Emily, and she missed only 6 days of school. Motherhood seemed to agree with Amy, but she still enjoyed times of being a teenager, spending time with her friends Angie Moore and Amy Summers. Summers recalled that Angie had a Halloween party, and it was so funny because Amy came as the Jolly Green Giant, and Emily was Sprout. And then Gloria came by later to pick up Emily so that Amy could have some teenager time with her friends. In the Weidner home, there were celebrations as well, like any family, except like mine, especially on Emily's birthday. On November 13th, 1989, 1 month after celebrating Emily's 2nd birthday, the Weidner home was changed forever. Gloria recalls that morning, Amy said that her throat was hurting, so she volunteered to take Emily to the babysitter. But Amy said, no, leave her home with me. Gloria couldn't remember exactly what time that she started to call to check up on Amy, but she thinks it was around 9:30 a.m. and she couldn't get her on the phone, so she called a neighbor and said, "Would you please go check on her?" The neighbor went over, knocked on the door, and did not get an answer. So she called back and said, "I can't get her to come to the door." Gloria immediately left work to go home and came home to a scene in Amy's bedroom that will always haunt her. She found her daughter beaten, strangled, and dead. She was laying on the bed, and you really just don't know what to do. You kind of panic, and I don't remember now if I called 911 first or if I got Emily out of the house. Emily was right there with her mother Amy. I didn't know what happened. I felt like someone had done something to her. The word murder is a really hard word. The only other thing I had a problem with for a very long time when I talked about her almost couldn't feel, said the aforementioned friend Amy Summers. Attending the funeral were not just those close to Amy, but also detectives. They went to the cemetery and to the funeral home that night just to watch people. With the leads that they had and the names they'd been given, they had to go just to study who was there. And one of the names they'd of course been given was Tony Abercrombie. He stated that she was a great girl and that there really weren't too many like her out there. She was very, very smart and pretty. Joy Haney was friends with Tony Abercrombie and Amy, in fact living right across the street from the Weidners at the time of the murder. She actually called him at work and told him, "Hey, you need to come home, there's something wrong." And he did. He stated that it hit him pretty hard, but he had an alibi. He was at work. So eyes turned to another friend, a Troy Jackson, who lived in the house behind the Weidners, and who police stated knew about the stereo equipment stolen on the day of the murder. DNA testing was of course in the early stages, so police photographed Jackson's hands, which did not show any bruises from a struggle. He also submitted hair samples, which did not match any that were found in Amy's bedroom, and he passed a polygraph test, so detectives continued their investigation into other suspects. Weeks went by, and then months, with still no arrests, and family and friends wondered, was there a killer in their midst? We didn't know who it was, and it makes you leery of everyone. It's constantly in the back of your head, just wondering who it was. It's a sad thought knowing the family you could have had growing up versus the family that just fell apart, and they didn't really know how to put the pieces back together to become the family they were before Amy died. Emily Weidner told reporters, "We became a family that didn't really talk for a long time. You just didn't know what to say. My children did not even come home from school for a while until they knew that I was home," Gloria stated. She did do her best to keep her life normal for family. She legally adopted Emily, and the little girl who had been a granddaughter and a niece became a daughter and a sister. And they stayed in the house where Amy was killed. In fact, they couldn't afford to move anywhere else, which is kind of unfortunate. Emily was raised knowing Cassie and Tanya as her sisters and JP as her brother, and Gloria as her mom. She understands that Amy is her biological mother, but Gloria raised her. Family and friends kept Amy's memory alive with stories for Emily, as did teachers just like Jody George, who had both Amy and Emily in her French classes. I said, "I just remember so many things about your mother and about how your mother felt about you," George said. "When it was time for Emily to graduate, we talked a little, and I said to her, 'I know your mom would be so proud of you right now.'" While Emily only recalls life after Amy's death, she says that when she watches home movies, she can see a before and an after. "My birthdays 1 and 2, the family is great. They were all happy. And after that, it sort of changes. You can feel the difference in their personality." And as one that has experienced that, death definitely changes you. I kind of see it as a before and after as well. I really lost myself after my dad died. It was a very difficult situation, but I definitely have a before Shannon and an after. I can't imagine. It was tough going for everyone, obviously, and police believe that Amy had been murdered by an acquaintance. With no arrest, fear and suspicion spread. When I'd come home and I'd know that one of my children were supposed to be home and they were not answering, I would have to walk up the same stairs to find out if they're in their room. someone who was. Detective Sergeant William Carter, a nuisance abatement officer, which I don't know what that is, but concerned about quality of life issues like underage drinking and overcrowding, Detective Sergeant Carter uses Facebook to try and find events being promoted, not solve murders. I really knew nothing about the case, Carter admitted. My job was to print this Facebook memorial page out. I looked at it, and eventually I read the case file and the case notes. It's something that I dove into, and I couldn't put it down. Now, I read that this case file was 68 pages long. Wow, that is a lot of pages. I then think of the Chris and Shanann Watts case files of 2,000 pages, and get a little sad that Amy's case is only 68 pages long. Anyway, in his own time, Carter continued working on the case, looking at everything that had been collected over 2 decades. Evidence at the crime scene, school attendance records from the day that Amy was killed, and even the list of people that attended the funeral. In the file was the original palm print that was recovered from the scene, Carter explained. Older files were, of course, all typewritten. He entered it into a database and soon realized that other investigators had overlooked some leads. There were tons of friends of her brother's that they never even talked to and never gotten DNA from, he said. Once I saw a lot of those things, I guess it became a mission of mine to say, we are going to fix this. When he was asked what work he had to do to solve this crime, he stated what he had to work with. I had the original palm print. It was a full palm print left on the wall in Amy's blood. And I had some partial DNA. Not enough to put in a national database. Carter started contacting Weidner's family and friends and asked for the names of people who might remember anything. And they began collecting DNA from individuals the police had ruled out. Luckily, in 1989, when they canvassed the neighborhood, they wrote down and took notes of everyone that lived in the neighborhood. And I took those notes and I went to those homes to see if people still lived there. Unfortunately, for the most part, most of them did not, Carter replied. So he tracked down old neighbors like Joy Haney, and he was mainly just asking me to recall the day and if there was anyone that, stuck out in my mind, or give him the names of people that hung out with us, Haney said. Most of the people that Haney mentioned were ones that Carter was already familiar with, people that had been cleared of any wrongdoing. But one name that she mentioned was new, a name that Carter hoped could solve a 22-year-old mystery. We probably all turned pale, Gloria said. It was disbelief. It would come in waves. There were times that I was very hopeful and I thought, yes, this could be solved, said Emily, who has for more than 2 decades been waiting for the justice. There were many times, so many years that had gone by that I didn't know. I just didn't know anymore, she said. But in 2012, with the cold case unit's approval, Detective Sergeant Bill Carter was on the case and asking lots of questions. I reached out to one of the former neighbors and she gave me the name Rodney Denk. Not as a suspect, but just to talk to him and see if he actually knew anything. But Rodney Denk was a new name that I hadn't heard. But the Weidners were very familiar with him. I hadn't seen him in a long time, but I would have considered him to be a good friend, said JP. They would do normal things that kids would do, running around, being teenagers, riding bikes, and fishing. When Detective Carter asked me about Rodney, I said no. Rodney was quiet and he kept to himself. There wasn't suspicion of Rodney. But still, my drink is too far away. Detective Carter went to Dink's Indianapolis home. He was long divorced from a woman with whom he had a son and lived with his mother. But he was at work at an auto shop when Carter came by. So Carter left his see if he had prior arrests and found a 1991 battery and a 1997 larceny. With his interests raised, Carter took the prints from Rodney's last arrest to the forensic unit to compare the palm print from Amy's bedroom wall. My goal was kind of, oh hey, I'll just submit it. If it doesn't match, we'll just move on. I just wanted to clear him as a suspect. Later that day, Carter checked back with forensics to see if he could cross Rodney off his list. But instead, he received stunning news. The print was a match. 22 years of waiting were over. Finally, there was a real suspect for the murder of Amy Weidner. I was kind of shocked. I did not expect it really to be that easy, Carter said. While it had been a year since he began to look at Amy's Facebook page, it was only in the past 2 weeks that he had been questioning potential suspects, and now he felt like he had his guy. But Rodney had disappeared. We contacted our fugitive task force to try and track him down, Carter said. He'd used his credit card to rent a car that happened to be equipped with OnStar. With the help of the OnStar tracking device, detectives went in search of Rodney, and in the meantime, Carter let the Weidners know they had identified a suspect, but did not give them a name. When asked about it, Cassie said she did not feel relief. She felt scared, because she wanted to know who it was. Which I totally understand. A few hours later, they would have their answer. Rodney's rental car was found in Indianapolis, where he was visiting a friend. As Rodney was about to get in his car, the police approached him, and he pulled out a knife. He made a statement, something along the effect of, "I didn't do it," and slit his wrist with the knife. But they were able to get him into custody without any further injury to himself or any of the other officers. They took him to the hospital to treat his wounds, and the Weidners wondered why their former friend would betray them. To comprehend that this person you knew did this, it's really just impossible to wrap your mind around, said Gloria. I think we just stood there looking at each other in shock. I found out through Cassie, and my next thought was, oh my gosh, he was at the funeral with us, Amy Summers said. How can you commit this murder, this brutal, to someone you know, and 2 days later sit with us at the funeral and mourn? It's a very good question. Rodney had even signed the guest book at the funeral. But that wasn't the only place that Carter found Rodney's name. He was overlooked. His name had been given to a detective as someone to talk to, and they had never talked to him at all. His name appeared in a 2003 statement from Tony Abercrombie, Emily's birth father, as someone who spent a lot of time at the Weidner house. If the name Rodney Dink ever came up in the course of my investigation, or when I re-looked through the files, that was one of literally dozens upon dozens of names that I may simply have not had the opportunity to look at during my years of the investigation. I simply do not recall seeing the name, said Spurgeon. It's so weird. What I don't understand is how you recognize mistakes that were made in this investigation that seasoned detectives overlooked, reporters asked Carter. I respected those people because I assumed, hey, I've never done this before. I'm just more like a civil type of police officer, but I don't know why no one ever looked at Rodney Dink. I really don't, he replied. Carter found himself an unlikely hero at the center of a press conference. It's been a long time for the family, I will say that, and I'm just happy we do have someone in custody so we can offer them some closure. It was emotional for me to think that all these years it was somebody that was there. It wasn't the boogeyman. It was somebody that was a friend of their family. With Rodney now under arrest and in the hospital, investigators got some long overdue answers about his motive. It was, as suspected, a robbery gone terribly wrong. His son Dylan was charged with murdering his mother, Mary McHenry. He beat her to death with a baseball bat, and the circumstances stand out to Kentucky Commonwealth Attorney Bruce Kugel. It's probably best described as a bizarre coincidence. The brutality of the crime and the fact that he was so young. He was 16, almost 17. 1 year younger than his father Rodney was at the time of Amy's murder. This one involved just a brutal act by a son against his mother. A mother who, according to court testimony, had a history of abusing Dylan. Rodney had little contact with his son or ex-wife over the years, but did attend some of Dylan's hearings, prompting a social worker to recommend Dylan be released to his father, who no one knew was living with his own secret murder. However, the judge ruled against releasing Dylan, and Dylan Dink was sentenced to 20 years. Meanwhile, his father was looking at spending the rest of his life in prison for the murder of Amy. Gloria Weidner was set to go to trial. Attempts at a plea deal had been stalled until Rodney told the prosecutor that no one else was involved in Amy's murder. Before he was offered this plea agreement, he had to make certain admissions. He said that he acted alone, which was something they felt confident in after they had intercepted some jail calls that he made to his mom, which he lived with, so I guess it's not that weird. They wanted to make sure that they could tell the family that they didn't need to be out looking for someone else. In June of 2012, 10 days before the trial was scheduled to start, Rodney pleaded, guilty to the murder and assault of Amy Weidner, and he was sentenced to 65 years. But despite the fact that he admitted to acting alone, family members and police are not completely convinced. Which, of course, I guess after 2 decades of waiting, it would be hard to just be like, okay, we're done. Lieutenant Spurgeon said, I definitely cannot definitively say that with the arrest of Rodney Dink, the case is closed, and he is the only one that will ever be held accountable for it. Without a trial, the Weidners would not hear testimony about what may have happened, but at hearings and sentencings, they faced this man who changed all their lives. I prepared myself to feel anger and overwhelming rage. When they brought him in, all I saw was Rodney, said Gloria. For the Weidners, having Rodney behind bars has brought some resolution, but the impact of Amy's murder still haunts them. They know that Amy's not coming back, so they feel relief, but there's still some sadness there. Gloria cried as she said, I miss her, and the older I get, the more I miss her. They're all growing up and they have their families and lives, and she's just not here. And watching Emily's birthdays and Emily's accomplishments, her graduation, I always feel like Amy should be here, enjoying these things. Gloria tries as best as she can to focus on the present. Amy's old bedroom, the site of the murder, and the place that she once feared is now used for happier times. It's for her grandchildren now when they come to stay. The only thing that's left in there is a hat that's on the door. It's not Amy's room anymore. And those touched by Amy have found through the years different ways to cope with their sorrows. In January of 2014, Bill Carter received the Indianapolis Police Department Award of Merit. He was offered the opportunity to join the homicide unit, but he declined. I thought that was really cool that they offered him the opportunity, even though he declined it. He solved that case out of the goodness of his heart because he got caught in it, and I think many of us do that. We get caught in these cases, and we desperately hope that someone can find answers so that these people have relief, and that's part of the reason why I do this. Maybe some case that families are desperate for any sort of resolution. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this one, and I will see you very, very soon. I was gonna say have a good night, but maybe it's daytime when you're watching this. I always do that.